Hey, welcome everybody, and thank you for spending your Friday lunch hour with us. My name is Christina Kind, and I am the program director at the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. Our mission is to bring together trusted partners to align strategies and inspire philanthropy to nurture a resilient community and environment. In addition to grant making to nonprofits and providing community scholarships, which are both traditional responsibilities of a community foundation, we focus on specific initiatives unique to the people and places of the North Tahoe Truckee area. Our work includes a special emphasis on communities' well-being, forest health, and housing needs. We are led by a visionary board of directors who are deeply engaged in their community and a talented team. Joining me today is my colleague, Maeve Donovan. We will be joined later in this call by our CEO, Stacy Caldwell, and our Director of Engagement and Communications, Ashley Beck. Oh, Ashley's on, I'm sorry. Thanks, Ashley, who is on the call. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge if we have anyone from the media joining us. If we do, could you please introduce yourself? Also like to acknowledge that we don't have Sierra Sun joining us today, but they have requested the recording of this Lunch and Learn, and so we will share it with them, and there may be a subsequent article in the newspaper. So the speaker series offers a chance to engage with housing solutions directly. Each session covers key housing related topics and includes a Q&A with experts in the field. We plan to host these sessions monthly, and we will survey you at the end of this hour to ask for your input on future topics. Today's agenda will start with an introduction to why ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, as being an important solution to our housing issues and what they are actually. We'll then dive into a panel discussion featuring Erin Casey, who will cover the legislation and local impacts of ADUs, and Dr. Thomas J. Powell, who will share insights on implementing ADUs in our area. We'll also address homeowner considerations and wrap up with a Q&A session where you can ask questions and engage in discussion. So during this session, please submit any questions you have via the chat box. We will try to address them all at the end of the panel discussion. However, Tom and Erin do have the luxury to address any questions that they see fit during the panel. I'd also like to remind you to keep your microphone on mute. Even though this format makes it easy to multitask, we encourage you to keep your camera on and to be an active listener. Again, we are recording today's session, and we'll make this available to you via email and by posting it to the Community Foundation's website. So just to get started on why we're talking about this topic, from 2017 to 2023, the Community Foundation facilitated the Mountain Housing Council, which was a 29 agency partnership and collaboration that focused on accelerating housing solutions. The Mountain Housing Council tackled the unique and pressing challenges of housing in our region, including availability, variety, and affordability as identified in biannual needs assessments. One of the Mountain Housing Council's goals was to highlight the gap between affordable housing programs, which rely heavily on government subsidies, and available housing in the North Tahoe Truckee region. So many people earn too much to qualify for affordable housing, but too little to afford market rate homes. To address this, the Mountain Housing Council developed the Achievable Local Housing Framework, shown here, which illustrates the spectrum of housing needs from those who are unhoused to upper middle income earners. What we know is that we have an unmet need of about 8,197 units in our region. This doesn't mean that we need that many new units, and instead it defines the number of households living and working in our region who are paying more than 30% of their income on housing costs, living in overcrowded housing with more than one person per room, or in a house that lacks plumbing or kitchen facilities. If we look at regional unmet need by income, we know that we have a significant amount of need for more affordable and available housing for those earning more than 80% AMI, which is for a household of four, roughly $83,350. So as I mentioned earlier, the majority of federal and state subsidy programs only provide financial support for housing programs that serve households earning no more than 80% AMI. and there are few to no state federal programs for the middle to above moderate income level households, making it more difficult to finance new housing for middle income salary earners. You'll also notice in this graphic that indicates the different types of housing that fit in this continuum, and you'll see that ADUs can be a solution for all income levels. Which brings us to today's topic. ADUs can be one solution or tool in our toolbox to help people living and working here in our community. So let's start with an ADU. ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, are secondary housing units located on the same property as a primary residence. They are sometimes called granny flats, in-law units, or backyard cottages. ADUs can take various forms, such as additional living spaces that are connected to the main house, such as over attached or detached garages or new additions. They can also be converted spaces, so existing areas within the main home, like garages, basements, or attics, that are remodeled into separate living areas. Or they can be detached units, separate buildings like small houses or cabins. ADUs are often used to provide additional housing options for family members, to generate rental income, or increase the property's overall value. They are becoming more popular in urban and suburban areas as a way to address housing shortages and make better use of available space. In 2019, the Mountain Housing Council published a white paper to be a comprehensive guide for builders, developers, elected and government officials, and homeowners to increase our understanding of ADUs. We wanted to know how we could increase the number of ADUs in our region to address housing needs, navigate recent legislative changes and new bills, and boost local rental options. Since then, the town of Truckee, Placer County, and Nevada County have launched ADU programs or guides for homeowners, and the state has pushed out a slew of legislation to promote ADU creation. We've invited Erin and Tom here today because of their knowledge and recent research on this topic. So Erin Casey recently completed an update to the Mountain Housing Council's ADU white paper, which we'll make available to you in the next few weeks. She's going to talk to us about how things have changed since 2019 at the state and local level, as well as give us a brief overview of her organization, the Tahoe Housing Hub, and its newly launched ADU Accelerator program. Dr. Thomas J. Powell recently completed his doctoral thesis, Barriers to Implementing Accessory Dwelling Units for Middle-Income Workforce Housing in a Rural Resort Community. He conducted quantitative and qualitative data here in Truckee. His research offers valuable insights into how ADUs can be pivotal in addressing the missing middle housing gap and fostering long-term community sustainability and workforce retention. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. A little bit more of a bio for Thomas J. Powell, Dr. Powell. He earned his Doctor of Law in Policy from Northeastern University and is a serial entrepreneur and international financer with nearly 4 decades of experience in banking, finance, and private equity. As a senior advisor at Brehon Strategies since 2008, Dr. Powell has focused on developing strategic solutions to housing challenges in rural resort communities. He is a native of the Sierra Nevada region. Erin Casey is a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in spearheading community service organizations in the Tahoe region across nonprofit and governmental sectors and companies encompassing economic development and workforce housing. Erin is currently the CEO of the Tahoe Housing Hub, a new workforce housing nonprofit corporation, and the principal and owner of Community Solutions Consulting. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to stop my share and it's not working. There you go. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin and I'm going to ask you our first question. I'm going to ask Erin a few questions, Tom a few questions. We do want this to be conversational, so you guys can both feel free to answer the same questions. We will engage in conversation for maybe the next 30 minutes, and then we'll allow for audience questions. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat box or hang on to them till the very end. So Erin, let's talk about key learnings from your ADU white paper. Starting with your research on recent state level legislation on ADUs, can you elaborate on its primary objectives and how it aims to address housing challenges?
Sure. So the first AD white paper that was done, basically, I'm spotlighted. Hi, everyone. Really covered 2016 until 2020 or so. And so there was a lot of legislation. I think many of you on this call are probably familiar or aware of that the state pushed out in that time frame around ADUs, really designed to move permitting and construction along in a more quick fashion and a more streamlined fashion. The area or the timeline that I covered or looked at was from 2020 until about the beginning of 2024. And the legislation, there's been a lot that's come out since then. And I think that the state in some ways was trying to address some of the learnings from that first round of legislation that came through. Really not seeing the permitting and construction numbers that the state wanted to see. So really further trying to address additional obstacles to getting ADUs on the ground. Continuing to find ways to streamline the permitting process, looking at ways to reduce impact fees. There are certain ADUs, depending on the size of the ADU, that can be exempt from impact or development fees, thereby reducing the cost to the homeowner. And also things like addressing HOAs. There were issues for a period after all the state legislation went through where there were some challenges with HOAs and their CC&Rs. And so the state passed legislation that made it so that HOAs could not prevent ADUs from being built. And I also want to clarify too that not only are we looking at accessory dwelling units, but we're looking at junior accessory dwelling units. So much smaller, attached to the primary residence. And so when we talk about ADUs, we're thinking about what Christina had showed you in the photo, but also the junior accessory dwelling units that also get sort of included in a lot of this legislation. More recently, what's been interesting is the state is allowing jurisdictions. There's legislation that allows jurisdictions to create an ordinance that would permit homeowners to sell their accessory dwelling unit on their property. The jurisdiction has to pass its own ordinance, but this is an attempt by the state to make it possible for people to get into an ADU and then purchase it if they want to. There's a lot of complexity to that, and but it is pretty interesting to see. I also think many jurisdictions have come out with pre-approved plans for people so that they're able to more easily develop a concept and then bring that forward. It can be very expensive to create a design for your project. And so a lot of our local agencies, the town, Placer County, Nevada County, and others have developed pre-approved plans so that a homeowner can actually look at that and decide to take that pre-approved plan and move it forward. And the idea is that the approval process would be quicker and they would not need to hire someone to do it. And so that's coming down from the state to implement some of those things. So it has been a flurry of legislation, a lot of things happening that address sort of jurisdictions' process to review and approve permits, the timelines that they have to do that, as well as looking at ways to reduce costs to homeowners who are willing to construct ADUs on their property. The other thing I would add is the state is really looking at ways to create programs that allow people that may own property and own a home, but don't generate the kind of revenue or don't have enough financing opportunity to build an ADU, really scaling the incentives to sort of bring them into helping us address the housing issue. So I think that's also some of the shifts that we're seeing at the state level. And I know there's some people on this call that may speak to this, but I didn't cover this in my white paper, but there's some movement here around looking at area median income definitions and how AMI can sometimes hinder our region when it comes to the ability to leverage state incentives around workforce or affordable housing. So I don't know, Tom, if you have anything to add just based on your own experience.
Thanks, Erin. And, I want to say thank you to Christina and to the town of Truckee, as well as Sierra Sun and all the parties that helped with this research, which was great. And Erin, I do have so many different comments I could make on there, but specifically, you're all here because you care about the region. Whether it's the region that you want to not see change or you've recognized that there is a housing challenge, and that's really what got documented throughout the research. So what's coming out of Sacramento and what's the opportunities for us, and now even being spoken at a national level, you all feel it here locally. And we feel it from the teachers that are no longer being employed because we can't attract them to the hospitals, to the county employees, to the nonprofit organizations where we're paying good, healthy salaries, yet there's not affordable, available, achievable housing that's within the market. And so this conversation is about firstly, what are both the anecdotal and the actual empirical data about what we ended up finding. And I just want to say thank you because you guys are really the experts in this area. I was just the researcher. So thank you. It's been a great being part of it.
Thanks, Tom. And we'll dig more into your research. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, please.
We'll dig more into your research in just a few questions. So, Erin, thank you for giving that overview. And you did say that some of the state legislation, addresses jurisdictional process to review and streamline and provides incentives. And so what are you seeing? I know your paper also reflected local data. And so what are you seeing at the local level with our jurisdiction?
Data, well, I'll speak to the local code. Because the state has passed so much legislation, many jurisdictions have to revise their own code and ordinances to comply with that state legislation. And so, of course, all of our regional jurisdictions have, in fact, done that. Placer County, the town, and Nevada County, really trying to, one, as I mentioned earlier, make pre-approved plans available. I think also the industry around prefab units is evolving. We have unique needs in our region, snow load requirements obviously being one of those. Not all of these prefabricated units are going to be able to address that, but the town, which for those that are on maybe representing the town, putting together that list of different types of units and the cost per square foot is something I think that's really helpful and something that we need to continue to do. In order to sort of incentivize people moving forward. But really, each jurisdiction adopted either certain review timelines. There are also changes to height, the kind of, how tall the building can be, the setbacks that are required, parking requirements. That's another thing. It comes up a lot. Even when you look at what other states are contemplating, really reducing the parking requirements when it comes to building an accessory dwelling unit is really important policy, or at least that's what the data shows us, that when you don't have to build parking or worry about parking, it tends to make it a little bit easier for the homeowner to do that. And so what we see in our regions is just, again, adoption of codes and ordinances to align with the state, but then, they've really gone a step further, many of them. I mean, the town has a loan program for ADUs. Each jurisdiction has a section on their website specifically devoted to ADUs. They've done workshops to try to help people understand what their options might be, how they would go about getting a permit to build the ADU, and also financing. Really trying to help people with financing. So, one of the things that we're learning as part of the Tahoe Housing Hub's ADU Accelerator program is that, for people that have a lot of equity in their existing property, they have more options, but there are some cases where people don't. And the financing right now, given interest rates, is very, very difficult to navigate for people. And construction costs are high. Right. And I think that part of the reason why looking at either kits or prefabricated units that meet our requirements and really sort of capture the character of our community is going to be important, because the idea there is that hopefully that will help reduce costs. I know that Placer County is also in the process of developing a program that would help offset costs for people looking to build ADUs as well. And so we see this happening across the board. Nevada County working with other neighboring jurisdictions to put together one website to really streamline, put calculators out there for people. So the jurisdictions in our region are really going above and beyond even what the state requirements are to really try and help incentivize these units, which has been really great. And I think that is why we'll see, or we have seen in some areas, the number of ADU permits being processed increase over the prior period, and the number of new ADUs being constructed has increased over the prior ADU white paper period. And I think the reason for that is in part because of our local jurisdictions adopting these new policies, but then also taking it many steps further to put together incentives that will really motivate people to do this.
Thank you, Erin. And Tom, knowing your financial background, we'll get to financial tools and incentives in just a moment. But I wonder if you could just walk us through your research. And in that research, you identified some challenges and opportunities for ADUs in Truckee. But how do your findings suggest that ADUs can help bridge the missing middle housing gap and contribute to long-term community sustainability and workforce retention in our region, as you just were hinting to in your earlier response?
Thanks, Christina. I don't want to be like in the debate where I don't actually answer that question sometimes, but depending on where it was, so probably too soon. But I just do want to speak to, Erin brings up so many salient points relative to if we could just have, a financing program in place, or if we could get the cost down and possibly through kits. There is no silver bullet, and that's the first thing that I want to say about this, because it's not just parking. It's an interrelation between all of these, and one of the challenges is the theory of AMI and how that does block a number of housing options that can be within there. So I think some of the most interesting points that came out that again play back a little bit to what Erin said was not only there's a portion of our community, some of you, that can't afford to do the ADU, and you can do it out of cash, or it can be done out of financing, or you've got enough equity in the house, or however that comes through, and we've got the data on that. The interesting part of it was that group, in an overwhelming more than 50%, is the group who's opposed to building an ADU. So they recognize there's a need, they just don't want to help bring the solution into there. And that main reason was not the bureaucracy, it wasn't the financing, it wasn't the cost, it was privacy. And so, again, when you think that we have a community that is many second homes that come out of primarily the Bay Area, they come here and it's crowded, and they come up to the Tahoe region, Tahoe Truckee region, and they want to have that second home. And maybe as they move towards their older years, they actually move here as permanent residents. They still want that idea of privacy. So the second part of that was, the one that was very surprising, was the town of Truckee. If you go out to the website on ADUs, and if you go to some of our associations, I'm going to throw out, Tahoe Donner as an example, there's really good accessible information regarding these topics. And Jamie LaChancellor, her team, they've been awesome at being able to help people through this process. And the number one, one of the top ones was, it's bureaucratic and we can't find any information and we don't hear anything about it. So it gives us that opportunity to actually be able to get out the information about how do we share what perhaps a modular pre-built ADU might look like, because I think people have a thought about how that's going to look. And so getting some of that in there might be some of those possible solutions, but also getting the public awareness out there of what it means to be the ADU. Erin again mentioned an ADU doesn't necessarily even change the footprint of the house. It could be that it's the ability to do the basement carve out in a building, which is pretty common down in San Francisco, or the attic remodel with a separate entrance in there. Or one of our qualitative was able to take where the master bedroom was, create a separate entrance, and that allowed her as a professional in our marketplace to stay in the area because she was able to rent that out and have the income. All these are the pieces that came out as both the quantitative and the qualitative side, which was part of the data.
Thanks, Tom. So hearing that privacy was the number one challenge, but I'm also hearing that, cost is also a challenge. And so I'm wondering, this is to both you and Erin, you guys have hit on it a few times now of different financial tools that could be available. And do you have any proposed solutions around financing that you think would be helpful for us to hear?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I know Tom has thoughts on this too. I think the first piece is, at least what we're experiencing with this new program, is that people don't know. First, it's education and understanding what your options are, right? Like, how do you finance the accessory dwelling unit, the construction of that unit? Is it a construction loan? Is it a second mortgage? Is it a home equity loan? And some of those things, the path that someone might choose is going to depend on their circumstances, of course, but I think that's the first piece. And one of the things that we, in doing the ADU accelerator, have learned is that we need to be able to help somebody understand what those options are, number one, at a high level, and then in some cases really guide them toward that financing tool. And so we actually have partnered with a loan broker out of South Lake Tahoe to help provide that education to homeowners who are interested in building accessory dwelling units. That being said, you know, what we're seeing is if you have a lot of equity in your home, you're going to have more options that don't then put you in a position of refinancing at a much higher interest rate than what you might have done several years ago. And that's part of the challenge for us right now, is there are a handful of individuals who want to move forward. They don't necessarily have the equity in the home, and their loan options are to an extent limited, or the cost of that loan is substantial on top of the construction costs that someone would incur. And if we're trying to build accessory dwelling units and keep them affordable for people, then the construction cost is important, because if the construction costs are significantly high, and then the person is being asked to then rent at a specific AMI, which then limits their ability to charge a certain amount for rent, that's a lot to ask that person. And we're realizing that scaling incentives is going to be really important, and scaling them based on what you're asking of that person. Are we asking them to restrict it only to a member of our workforce, kind of similar to the achievable housing definition? Or are we asking them to restrict the unit to an 80% area median income or lower? Those are two very different scenarios. Those are two very different income scenarios for them down the road. And so it makes it difficult for them to make those decisions. I think that, you know, some of the incentives, the loan programs, I think there are some communities that have organizations developing loan products with banks. So really partnering to see if you can find a loan product at a low interest rate for somebody who is going to build workforce housing, or, you know, forgivable loans, grants, covering the cost of the deed restriction and scaling that deed restriction. Those are some other things that I've seen across the state, and I think could make a difference even here locally. I also want to note that in the Tahoe Basin, we've got the added, you have the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and you have development rights. And so that creates a layer of complexity and additional cost to a homeowner who might want to build an ADU. They have to obtain that development right. There's a cost associated with that unless they deed restrict the unit. And that deed restriction, of course, comes with limits on what on somebody's income that would be in that unit, and or where they work. And so I think those are just some of the things to keep in mind, and some of the incentives and loan programs that we've seen. And one other thing I'll add is, because the state really wanted to engage people who were at a lower income level but own property and wanted to maybe build an ADU, they have created much larger incentives for those individuals. Hello Housing is an organization that we've modeled our ADU accelerator program after, and they provide free technical assistance to a homeowner who wants to build an ADU. If that homeowner is willing to deed restrict the ADU at a, let's say, 80% AMI or lower, the incentive gets much larger. They will offer up to $150,000, which includes free technical support, which then helps that homeowner offset their construction costs. And so that's an example of a scaled incentive and how their program has evolved over time to try to bring in or broaden the homeowners that are participating in helping us address the housing issues.
Thanks, Erin. Those are really great. Tom, take it away and then I can recap what you said.
Yeah, there's about 5 points in there, Erin. I appreciate it. So one, my background is I come out of banking as a primary background, and specifically we've done large scale projects of financing across both in commercial and residential. That's not my only background. We also have done a development up at North Star that was a modular built property. So we actually have, we bought the property from East West after bankruptcy and have been able to put some what we thought were going to be affordable homes up there, and they were nowhere near affordable homes at the time, partly because of costs. So we still haven't solved that. The data, what we came across was, again, if you take the demarcation of 50% of the people said, hey, I can do this, but I don't want to. We need to start with the people who do want to, which are many of our permanent residents here. That's because I only surveyed owners of property. So this wasn't a tenant survey. This wasn't a local population survey. So many of the people were actually outside of the area that owned the property. So I was looking at who would do, has the ownership of the property and can actually make that determination. So if we break it down to then the 50% that said they would like to do it, or roughly 50%, then it comes down to many of the barriers that Erin speaks about, which is number one being cost. But number one really actually is financing and access to capital.
Right.
They think it's costs, and everybody thinks it's costs, but as we've seen mortgage rates move back up into an actual more normal range, which people don't generally want to talk about it at this point, because we had really low rates for a long period of time, that created a handful of challenges. One, the low rates caused housing prices to jump up because you can afford more house for less payment. So now that's caused a chasing of the houses, and now those houses are basically at those areas where they're not going to turn over. There's not going to be that marketplace. The second challenge of that is if the person does refinance it, they are going to pay a higher payment, and probably that increased rent is not going to make up for that higher payment. And then one of the areas of legislation that still seems unclear and needs to be, at least worked on, is that we had one of the people that was interviewed was, we bought the house in 2010. One of the best times to buy, or 2010, 2011, one of the best times to buy in the Truckee region. And that house has gone from being 140,000 up to over 900,000 now. So they've got the equity, but if they pull out the equity, first of all, they refinanced at the lower rate and they've been able to pay down their mortgage. But if they pull out that money, they also run the possibility that still seems to be unclear, is the house going to be reassessed at the new value because of the add-on of the ADU as a freestanding? And there's legislation about that, but it's not necessarily clear of how the taxing committees are going to end up doing that. So they get an increased rent, they get an increased mortgage payment, they possibly get an increased dramatic change to the taxes. They also now run the risk, which all of us are aware of, that possibly the fire insurance that they had before doesn't renew on the property. So these are challenges. They're not insurmountable, but I do want to put you asked for solutions. So one of the solutions, while I was going through this and being an entrepreneur, not just an academic, was I wrote a white paper that was modeled off of the property assessed clean energy program called PACE, which is kind of a Melrose taxation. And it was something that somebody can borrow, and it becomes basically what's called a super lien. So it could be a lien that gets placed on the property to help solve this problem. And I think involved with using this kind of modeling, along with so the county collects the taxes essentially on that property. It could allow the banks, as Erin was talking about, to create a model of a program for financing that could be a much lower rate mortgage, because it could be sold to the insurance companies, it could be used as part of the CRA programs for the banks to be able to provide a pool of funds within this county and taxation area, and we could target it throughout California, but specifically in our region for the county's need that we have. So we have a need absolutely for AMI measured housing. But if all the programs are geared towards that, it does not help us solve the challenge of being able to build a 2 or 3 bedroom property that allows either a teacher or a firefighter to stay in our community because of the rent, or it's actually a functional house for them. And so financing is one of the key areas that we've got to get there. The other one that is the challenging, and this is where Erin's program and organization comes in handy, is most people have never built a house. Most people have not built multiple houses. And the bureaucracy is not because it's so awful. It's that's the bureaucracy of building a house and what it's been over the last 40, 50, 60 years and continues to get there. The ADU financing in the town of Truckee and the region has done a great job at trying to bring that down as far as a barrier, but it's still extremely complex. And so we've got to solve that.
Well, we have the right people in the room. Let's solve it. So thank you. Thanks for expressing more of the challenges and providing those solutions. I mean, we're definitely hearing the construction costs are a challenge, and so I appreciate you bringing up the modular design, the prefab kits. Those can be pieces of it. The financing and access to capital, loan products with low interest rates. We will share links out to the PACE program after this. So thank you, Tom, for bringing that up. Erin, you raised another issue of scaling incentives and tying those to AMI. Both of you did. And so I think that could be a separate lunch and learn and maybe a future one. So thank you for mentioning that. And forgivable loans is another thing. And even where you're building within the basin matters. And so before we move on to the next and last question, before we open it up, I am curious of how many people in this room are interested in actually building an ADU. And maybe you can just raise your hand using the Zoom function if that is something that you're interested in. So I see one hand up. Let me see. 2, 3.
Awesome.
That is awesome. That's fantastic. Oh, 4. All right. Wonderful. 5.
Well, we got the program for you.
Yeah, so maybe that's a great segue. Just knowing that we do have some people here who are really looking for that practical tips. Erin, if you could just give us just a really quick overview of what the ADU Accelerator program is, and then the final question to both of you is how, what can homeowners do? What advice do you have to them? In a closing thought, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Sure. And sorry, one other thing I wanted to mention is impact fees, offsetting like impact and development fees. That's another sort of financial component that could really help. So the program that the Tahoe Housing Hub, it's our flagship program, and it's modeled after, we call it the ADU Accelerator. It's modeled after Hello Housing. They are a nonprofit based in the Bay Area. They created a program called Hello ADU. It has been incredibly successful, and many of you probably heard Jennifer Duffy when she came and presented, I think, to Mountain Housing Council a couple of years ago, talking about Hello Housing as well as this program. And the program has expanded across multiple jurisdictions, and the way it's designed is to provide homeowners who are interested in building ADUs with free technical assistance, really starting from the very beginning, from the design process to applying for a permit, to putting a bid together and selecting either a general contractor, or if you're looking at a design professional, as well as managing the construction process for them. As you heard earlier, a lot of the homeowners, at least that we've worked with, didn't necessarily build their homes. Many of them are local full-time residents, and they have jobs, they have families, they don't have the kind of time or experience really to manage a process. And so we also help with lease-up support as well toward the end. So if somebody has never been a landlord before, want to make sure they receive the support and training that they need, and then opportunities to really pair them with a tenant, and looking at ways to partner with the Workforce Housing Agency on that, to really help once we do have the ADUs on the ground. But that's the way the program is. And so we take intake forms. We are focused. It is funded by, I want to mention, the Martis Fund gave us initial funding to start developing the program concept. And then we were fortunate in securing close to a $500,000 grant from the TOT TBID Dollars at Work program from the North Tahoe Community Alliance. And so those are our two funding sources. We are focused primarily in the Eastern Placer County area because most of our funding is for that region. But we do have some funds available to do work in Truckee. And so we've opened the program up to a test group, I would say, so that we can test our process, learn as we go. We were fortunate in being able to hire Carolina Scarsha, who formerly worked for the town of Truckee and has a lot of experience in land use. And so she's really been working alongside our homeowners and learning as we go what their needs are. But that is really how the program is designed. And what's great about it is the ROI on it is pretty solid, because when you think about the investment that our local jurisdictions are making in building workforce housing units, the subsidy is extreme. It's very expensive to build workforce housing. And if we can get an accessory dwelling unit that's deed restricted from a $30,000 investment in free to the homeowner technical assistance, that is a really good ROI. And Hello Housing was able to get 20 new accessory dwelling units constructed in a 2-year time frame with that $500,000 investment that they initially received. And so we have essentially taken that program and we've customized it for our region. And so if you're interested, if you know of someone that is interested, let us know. You can apply online, and we'll set up an intake call with you to kind of understand your property, your interests, what your goals are, and then see how we might be able to help you.
Christina, I just want to say that when Erin talks about that, and it could be said that it's only 8 homes when we've had a problem of 8,000, right? But those 8 homes matter to those 8 home property owners, as well as the families that are living within those homes. And it's a start, right? One of the main reasons that looking at the ADU is a better use of land and capacity of what we already have for infrastructure. And so I think that that's a really important piece. And I will say that part of the research also came out that what people were nervous about renting the property and having somebody close to them, or what is it even going to be to go through that property, rental process, because not only have many of them not ever built a home, most of them have never been a landlord. And I know we've got Heather on the phone, I think or on the line, and I think that's part of her business research there that she can actually somewhat speak to, is being able to help people with that. And we have an amazing region of creative thinkers. And that's such a great piece to think of. None of these are going to be the one, as I said, the silver bullet, but it is that opportunity of where it kind of starts melding together. And it's better to start solving it one at a time. And hopefully we can get to scalability and find some of those solutions.
Right. There's a tipping point, I think. In some of the communities that are a little bit further ahead in the number of ADUs that they have, are now doing tours, right? So that people, and to the privacy issue that Tom mentioned for some, that has come up in other parts of the state. And so some of these tours are designed to show people how they can develop an ADU on their property and maintain their privacy. And so it gives them a visual idea of what is possible on that site. And so really trying to understand, right, we're working with our residents, the public, the community, what's going to motivate people to move forward with this approach. And I think given some of the complexity of development in our region, ADUs are a great option for developing within an existing neighborhood where you have an existing footprint already. And so that's why we're seeing across the state, a lot of communities embracing this approach in order to really address their housing issues. And as I said earlier, the ROI on it can be really solid given the cost to subsidize other types of housing units. The one other thing I will add is some people, when I think about ADUs, imagine a very small home, and that's not, the wrong way to think about it. But ADUs can be up to 1,200 square feet. I've seen one, a lovely ADU in the Tahoe City, in Tahoe City. It's an A-frame and it's a 3-bedroom ADU. It's 700 and I don't know, 50, Samir might be on the call now, square feet. But when I had my daughter, I would have lived there. You know, I think there are a lot of people who would. So you can scale these and they can serve an individual who is just looking for a very small unit, a studio, for example. But you can also create a unit that could serve a family's needs too. And so there are a variety of needs that can be addressed. There are a variety of approaches that can be taken. And I think as we are able to bring more of that forward and learn from other communities, but then also help the public see, like, this is what you can do. This is what's possible. Let's do a tour of what exists here. Let's show you what design options exist, and design options that really are consistent with the community feel that is so important to our region. And we have a lot of opportunity for that, I think.
If I can, I know you want to keep moving on to the questions, but I just want to add, check out, and I'm not pushing her books, I'm not making anything off her books, but there's one particular author out there that's getting table type books that is Sherry Coons, Sheri Coons, Koones. And she has a number, and you can see the progression that's been over her books over the last 10 years, because it was like one book every 3 years, and then it's like 5 books in the last 6 months. And one of them is about prefab homes and the quality of them, and then also the various ADU designs. And over the summer, I was back at for an alumni program at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard, and ADUs are definitely being talked about. And so to the privacy issue that we mentioned, part of that is, Erin is spot on, and I know we've worked with Stacy and we're working on something now to put a couple of ADUs on some property up in the North Star area, so that people can come and visit and see and walk these and what they are. So it's going to be a land donation, some other funding sources. There's still a long ways to go to this, but be able to show how this could be. And Erin, you're spot on in that in the 60s, the average home was less than 950 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so as a person from the 60s growing up with 8 siblings, it's very possible to be in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house and still be very functional, right? And we're not saying that's what it should be, but we grow to these McMansions, and it really did change the model of what it is. And many other places outside of the United States have it very functional, and it does create a sense of community. There's a lot of wins for this as well.
Yeah.
Well, that was so inspiring and so educational. Thank you, Erin and Tom. You're so knowledgeable, and I wish we had more time for you guys to tell us more. A lot of resources were talked about today, and so I've been trying to make note, including Sharon Coon's book, Tom. And so we will make sure to send those out after, but I do want to allow time for questions. And so we have a little bit more than 10 minutes. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box or to raise your hand using the Zoom feature.
And Christina, I think after that, if there are like some comments people have, because I know there are a lot of really knowledgeable people on this call that might have a few things to add just based on their own experience. So.
Thanks, Erin. Absolutely. And there are some comments here in the chat. So Heather, thanks so much for including your information on your company, Relay Estate, sorry,
yes.
RelayEstate.com. And she also made the comment, like, how do we do an ADU tour like Martis does for their home? So great suggestion and comment.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a shout out to Heather and just say, she's the ideal of what we want to keep in our community, which is, I don't know if many of you know, she just finished her MBA at Berkeley, traveling down there, doing that work, but doing the work back in our community, which is fabulous. That's what we want. We want to be able to retain our people in the community. And my family goes back over a century in the area. So I've left, I've come back, my kids, same way type scenario, but this is what we want, is it being an integral part of that. And we have to have housing as part of the solution.
100%.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks, Tom. So there is a question in the chat, and then Nancy, I'll get to your question. Claire has asked, how does the fact that much of North Tahoe is unincorporated affect the ADU process?
Well, I don't know that it being unincorporated affects the process, because either way, the way in which, so Placer County on the California side, I'll speak to that. They manage the permitting process, and they have adopted all the same ordinances, the same as the town has, for example. They have to comply with state legislation in the same way, except for in some cases, the Tahoe Basin, where you have the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, right? And so because they are a bi-state agency via the bi-state compact, that they supersede state legislation in some areas, right? And so that pertains to development rights and things like that. But I would just say that, what I've seen, at least in Placer County, has been just continued investment in trying to address housing in a variety of ways. One of the things that we've had to do in order to make sure our program is going to work is really develop and strengthen our partnerships with the land use agencies themselves, because it doesn't do us any good to bring a bunch of people forward who want to build ADUs if we're not all sort of aligned and we don't understand on our end what the land use agencies need to process the permits, to process the applications, those sorts of things. So really trying to help ensure that when we bring a homeowner forward to that land use agency, the application is complete, which makes their life easier. And I will say that they've been wonderful partners with us. And I also know that, as I mentioned earlier, they're developing a program called Launchpad. They presented the concept at a high level at a recent board meeting in Tahoe. I think Tim Cusson, who's developing that, is on this call, and is likely to be a program that'll be made available to people in the not too distant future. So kind of a lengthy response, but I don't see that the unincorporated nature of it has really had an impact in any way, because they are held to the same standards as a town or an incorporated jurisdiction would be.
I would agree that I think that the state legislation has really made that more unified, more uniform, I guess, thing. There's a couple of questions, if you don't mind, because I can cover both of them. Rhonda, you're spot on. One of the major challenges is septic systems, and it's a
Yes.
don't pass go scenario. There are solutions that are used in other communities in the United States, as well as other communities that are definitely used in parts of Europe, that they've been able to do those. And I think that those are a possibility, because that opens up a whole bunch of properties that would like to do this, which I think is great. And then for Karen, my research was not specific on, everybody had to say that they recognize that there's a middle income workforce housing problem, and either they would want to rent out their ADU, or they wouldn't want to do an ADU to rent it out or sell it if it was one of those scenarios. So I didn't do that specific, but I will tell you anecdotally, the majority of ADUs that we see are for personal use. And therefore the personal use of either family, friends, or moving into, so that, that's a part of it, and the short-term rentals. This new program, I think, gives us the opportunity to say, look, there's a lot more usage. And it's because prior to 2016, almost no one could get an ADU done. So we don't have a lot of current process relationships of saying, what are these like as rentals, and not just short-term rentals, because we do have data on that. But what are new ones looking as an actual solution? So I think it gives us an opportunity to find out what it is.
Yeah,
Karen?
and if I could just add to Karen's question about, how many people, what's motivating them for us, we're seeing, and again, I would say we've had in-depth conversations with about 20 unique people in our region over the last a month or so. And I'd say about a third of them are interested in building an ADU for personal use. They have a family member, their parents are aging, and they want to be able to move them close by. Or they have a child, an adult child that they want to be able to house. And so they're motivated by that. And then I'd say the other 2/3 are a combination of rental income and wanting to address the housing issue. So it's kind of a mixed bag. When we spoke with Jennifer Duffy recently from Hello Housing, she said that they see the majority of their homeowners are building their ADUs for personal use, but underneath that, the vast majority of the others are building it to address the housing issue. And so for us, when we meet with a new homeowner, one of our first questions is, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve in building this unit? Are you trying to improve the value of your property? Are you trying to serve a personal need that you may have for your family? Or are you trying to address the housing issue? In some cases, people have multiple answers, but in others, it's very specific and very helpful to us in terms of who we work with. I have not had conversations with people that are interested in building them to make them short-term rentals. But that may be because there's some clear language on our website regarding that, but that doesn't mean that, you know, those folks aren't out there. But just wanted to share what we're hearing and seeing in our conversations with people.
There's some great questions in the chat, but I know Nancy has had her hand up now for a while, and so I want to give her the opportunity to ask her question or make her comment. Nancy. Or Bill. We can't hear you. It looks like now you're muted again. So we'll, maybe if you're able to, you could type in your question to the chat and we'll make sure we get it answered. And then I saw Stacy's question next. It was building on the septic. So maybe Tom, you can take that one. Are the ADUs that are attached and part of the existing home, oops, I just lost it, allowable on septic?
Well, before that, there was somebody said that would people live in our ADUs, and my daughter texted back and said, yes, all of your children at one point have lived in your ADU to be able to have enough money to buy their own houses. So yes, and they loved it, right? And I look at moving into my ADU at some point because it's a very awesome house. So that's kind of an anecdotal. To Stacy's question, it's the great economic answer of it depends. They're going to have to get the septic evaluation to see if it can put the new features, the new fixtures into there, and it's by bedroom size, right? In most cases, I'm not an expert on septics, but that's what I understand. And then also the construction of the JADU, even if it's attached to the house, if it doesn't work within the setback of what's required for that septic system, that's also going to be a problem. So just because it's an attached JADU, even if it's not, if it's an internal JADU, I think that can still be a problem because you have to have the capacity for the septic. So it's not an answer. It's still something to be researched specifically. And I think there are a lot of opportunities, especially with the JADU scenario of maybe there's a bedroom or an above the garage scenario, so it didn't impact the footprint of the house. And that we can look at that as some of the solutions that are out there if the capacity of the septic system's there. Again, as Erin said, there's experts way better than myself to answer the specific question on that on this video.
Thanks, Tom. So thank you. I was actually going to ask if the jurisdictions wanted to weigh in on Elizabeth's question, and it looks like Jamie from the town of Truckee has, and Carolina from Tahoe Housing Hub. So hopefully, Elizabeth, that answered your question. Andy, I was just reading through yours, and it looks like Heather has addressed it.
If I could just elaborate, I know we're almost out of time, but I hear you, Andy, and I think that, you know, we are working with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and Placer County on this. We've had a lot of really great meetings on it to really help sort of do our best to streamline the process, to make sure that we are, when we're meeting with homeowners, have a clear understanding of the path, the process. It's not easy, and there's good reason for that, you know, in some cases. But I think what we're trying to do is to help that homeowner so that it isn't overwhelming. And also, you know, when you lose a few weeks, especially in the Tahoe Basin, given the limited construction window that you have, that can really create a problem with your timeline. Costs can increase over that period as well. So really trying to move things along more quickly, and doing that by working alongside people who have knowledge and have relationships with the jurisdiction, and our program is aligned with their goals too, is really important.
Thanks, Erin. And Nancy did put in the chat box. I just want to make sure that we give her the opportunity to share. So she wanted to share that she just got back from Portland, Oregon's first ever ADU prefab factory tour and tiny home on wheels tour of numerous units. She'll be presenting to the Tahoe Sierra Board of Realtors next week about options for making ADU sales possible in the future. Thanks for doing this series. And so Dr. McPherson, I think that's a message I'm hearing too, is that we have more outreach and education to do to our community. And we can start here with this meeting. So we can start by sharing the links. Erin, Tom, I'll give you a second to close us out. And then I just have one slide I want to share on other ways you can get involved with us. So Erin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just first of all want to thank you, Christina and Stacy and Tom. This has been, I really, and like ADUs, I feel like I go to bed thinking about ADUs, but I really think that it is a great opportunity to address in part our housing issues, but in order to continue to make it work, we're going to continue to have to innovate and adapt and evolve our program. I think, we develop some of our programming for, I think, projects that are developed by maybe not individual homeowners, and looking for they're going to be motivated by different things than developers for larger projects might be. And so deed restrictions and incentives and scaling all of that is going to be really important for us as a region to address the issue. And I think in the Tahoe Basin, there's going to be, fortunately for us, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is developing, or has developed, a very robust community outreach process to really have additional conversations around housing and development rights, because that also creates additional, I'd say, constraints and cost to that homeowner. And then looking at what we're asking of people. Are we asking, what is the request? They're putting in a lot of money in construction, the time, and then the management of that unit, as well as the reporting requirements if you're going to deed restrict it. And so I think there's a lot more that we can do to continue to innovate in these areas and learn from each other and adapt our programs as necessary.
Thank you, Erin.
Well, first I want to say that Jamie did put into the box about the septic, so check out for one of the experts that knows the information and follow that guide. Imagine it's 4 or 5 years from now. What does the Tahoe Truckee region look like, and how can we make an impact in that area? And that's why I think we're all doing the work here and why we're showing up to these. We know that walkable cities, walkable towns, and that density in itself is not a bad thing. It's proper density, and how can we look at it, and how do you keep the look of the town that we all love so much, the area that we love and the region. And it's sustainable development. It uses resources in many ways much better than what building a new subdivision does. It can impact both the low income and the median income. It can be for professionals. It can allow somebody to put on there. It can allow someone to stay in their house. And AARP is showing that it can allow for people to age in their houses and transition to something that allows them either the larger house to allow a family or their family to move in, or caretakers to move in. So again, I don't want to say that this is a panacea, silver bullet for all of the region's challenges, but I am pleased that California's taken such a proactive approach, and that our community here, and led by Mountain Housing Council and TTCF and the Housing Hub and the professionals on this, continue to move it forward. And I give it a lot of positive momentum. We do need to fix financing. That is an absolute. And if you can get a motor home, like a new, Sprinter van that's a couple $100,000 financed on a 30-year financing at affordable rates, we certainly can figure out how to get ADUs financed at affordable rates, right? So there are ways to get it. It's just going to take the right people in the right room to be able to get done. So thanks for letting us be a part of that. And I really appreciate everybody's assistance in getting the research done and also being a part of this. Thanks, Christine.
Sorry about that. Thank you for ending us on that message of hope, and thank you for all your great work, Erin and Tom. We will make your documents available to this group afterwards. I also just appreciate you bringing up, Tom, the intersectionality between other issues in our community, and how it's not a silver bullet, but can be definitely a part of the solution. And just wanted to share ways you guys can get involved. Mountain Housing Council wrote in amendments to a bill called SB 440, that's for regional housing finance authorities. It would allow us to set our own sub-regional AMI, which you guys have heard so much about in this call today. And it's going to Governor Newsom's desk to be signed. And so today is kind of one of the last days to get in a letter of support. And so we just want to put a plug in for that bill and ask you if you have the time to support it with the governor. We will be doing these monthly, taking some time off for the holidays, so please attend a future lunch and learn and participate in your local public meetings. The See Your Sun, in partnership with the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation, has been doing a public meeting watch. We're doing live survey polls that helped inform this lunch and learn and some of the research around ADUs, and more stories on housing. And so you can stay informed by following the See Your Sun, and you can donate to Housing Solutions through the Tahoe Truckee Community Housing Solution Fund. So we will send a recap with a link to this recording, links we talked about in an email, and we will also make sure it's available on the Community Foundation's website. And Erin, I see that you want to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to mention the Hops and Homes event.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's next Thursday at Alibi in Truckee, and many of us will be there. The Hub, the Workforce Housing Agency, many of the jurisdictions here. I think we'll be outside there from 4 to 6 p.m. So if you'd like to swing by, we're going to be there just sharing a lot of information on what each of us is doing, and just continuing to have community conversations. And so just wanted to throw that out there. Hops and Homes.
Great. Thanks, Erin. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are so happy that so many of you were able to join us, and we hope to see you at a future lunch and learn. Have a great